Welcome to Pachehra Talks. My name is Arun and I'm Solutions Architect MCT, currently working with Novintech, which is one of the best organizations to work with. Also received many Great Place to Work awards. And today in this video, we are going to secure the PaaS services and in PaaS services, Azure App Service. It is in continuation of network security. Do not think I'm jumping to a different topic altogether. No, it is in the continuation, but the next topic as per the syllabus was the securing PaaS services. So yes, the network plays an important role here, but securing PaaS service with an example of app service is our agenda for today. All right, so we all understand what is PaaS services, IS services, SaaS services. If you do not, you can check out that video in my channel, and it's easy to understand. For the newbies, I could simply say staying at your home, staying at hotel, or staying on rent is kind of difference in IS, PaaS, and SaaS. Owning your home is IS service and staying on rent is PaaS service. Staying at hotel is SaaS service. You can further take this analogy as your car, your Zoom car, and you are just sitting at the back seat with the driver. So your own car is your IS service, your Zoom car is your PaaS service, and you're sitting at the back with the driver in the front. Taxi is your SaaS service. It is related to the control and the permissions that you have or the management that you are passing on to the other folks. For example, for your car, you own everything, you take care of everything, just like in IS services, like virtual machine. You take care, you manage, you do everything. In PaaS services, you give a lot of management to the service provider like Azure, and you only use the car, right? Or you only stay on rent. And staying in hotel is just like a SaaS service. Anyways, if you want to learn that in detail, if you're absolutely beginner, then you can check those videos in this channel. But we do not want to deflect from the topic. We are covering security specialist, and today it's time to understand or secure the app service. So just for the starters, we understood what is PaaS service. So here we do not need to secure from top to bottom because this is a shared service model. And for the PaaS services, we have only few things to secure and manage. So let's suppose this is our Azure, as you can see on the screen, and this is our virtual network. Pardon for the spelling. Then we have this Azure App Service. It is a PaaS service. That is the reason I'm not creating it or designing inside the virtual network. Though we can have those integration, that's what we're going to learn. Like one of those point is. So PaaS service is the public service. So it has public IPs associated with it right now. It is accessible from the publicly you can access. For example, there is some guy sitting here. Like we are not applying any security or anything. Okay. Right now, in that situation, when you create this app service, you get the URL, and that URL can easily be browsed from anywhere until you apply the security. So this guy here running with his laptop, okay, it doesn't look very nice, but just for the concept, for the perspective of concept, just trying to. Mm, all right. Okay. Now this guy can simply access this app service to the URL that you get when you create the app service by default. But that's not how we usually run our production environment. So what we do, we secure it. Now let's talk about those things that we use to secure it. So the very first is authentication and authorization. I hope you guys have the understanding what's the difference between authentication and authorization, right? Authentication is who you are, and authorization is how much you can do in the uh, for example, you authenticate it and get into the Azure portal, right? That proves who you are once the authentication is done. But what all you can do in the Azure portal, will, who will decide this? Something is wrong with my mouse. Well, authorization will decide this. What can you do? What can you do, or things you are authorized to do in Azure? That's the authorization. So whenever we have the app service in place, because this is something provided by Azure by default in app service, you can you can simply use what? You can simply use Azure AD or Entra ID, Azure Entra ID to manage user access and enable single sign-on across your applications. So this will enhance the security. Then if you want to enable like folks who do not you are, who are not inside your Entra ID, you can also enable social authentication. Okay, sign-ins. For example, you have seen that social authentication whenever you log into like Facebook, Twitter, or any other such application, it gives you an option. Either you can create your credentials or you can utilize your Gmail ID to log in, things like that, or your Facebook ID or your Microsoft ID to log in. So you can utilize that feature of app service for the folks who are not in your Active Directory and you want them to access or log in into your application. So you have to build that application accordingly, right? Then this is about the application, but for the folks who are accessing it from Azure, like as a resource, your Azure administrators who creates the Azure App Service, who creates the virtual network, who configures the connection string and let the app service talk to the database. How can you manage those? Well, authentication is one, multi-factor authentication is second for those administration. Along with that, let's call it RBAC or least access principal privilege, least privileged access principle. Okay, least privilege. You don't want to give them all the privileges. You want to give them what they should have as per their work, right? If there is a developer who just needs to develop the code, you don't want to give the owner access to the subscription to the developer. Like there is nothing wrong with the developers, they are fantastic people, but as per their work, they develop the code, right? If you have a user admin, you don't want to give him the access to do something in the on the AKS cluster or on the storage because he is supposed to manage the users. So accordingly, so these three things is pretty normal and usual for authentication. Okay. Now the second point is network security. I told you network security will come. So network security is here. Okay. Network security. So what we can do in the network security, as I told you at the beginning, this is the PaaS service, publicly accessible, and it is not inside your private isolated virtual network, but it doesn't mean you can enable something and it will become the part of your network. Yes, you can. The first thing is you can have VNet integration with your virtual network. Okay. You call it a VNet integration. Okay, there is some subnet, let's call it a subnet. This is one subnet, and you can integrate your app service with the subnet. There is one more thing that you can do. This integration with the virtual network means traffic can flow inside virtual network from app services and utilize what? Utilize Azure services. Or maybe you want to create the internal application, right? So it can work like this. It's not publicly accessible and traffic can flow to the Azure services. If you're not using virtual VNet integration, then how app service will talk to the database? over the MS backbone or public to public IP, right? That's not good. So it's better you integrate it, let it flow through your virtual network, private virtual network. Okay. Now, there is one more thing that we can do, that is a private endpoint. Yes, we can have a private endpoint as well. We can utilize the feature of private endpoint. Private endpoint. Now, the thing that we need to remember, VNet integration. VNet integration is giving you flow to use your Azure services towards the virtual network, and private endpoint giving flow to your Azure services to use Azure app services. So private endpoint for the inbound for the app services, and VNet is the outbound for the app services. Okay. And there are various reasons, scenarios, situations where we need both kind of traffic flow. So private endpoint and VNet integration both make your app service private to your virtual network, hence enhance the security. Now you can do what? You can simply add a layer of uh, Azure access restriction, which is there in almost all the PaaS services, where you can only allow certain IP addresses that can access the Azure App Services and block the entire public access. So access restriction is something that you can also utilize. For example, you have enabled private endpoint and VNet integration, and you don't want people to access your application from outside. You can have the access restriction blocked everything, or enable for only known IP addresses, or block for the known IP addresses, things like that. This is not done yet, so do not judge the design. Design is completely different, architecture is completely different, but here we are learning the various aspect of security which will help us to secure the app service. Okay, so these are the three things from the network security perspective. Now this gentleman sitting here, the bald guy, he's still trying to access app services. Okay, now suppose this guy has the access to access the app services. So what we want this guy to access the app services? How? We want this guy to access this service on the HTTPS only. We don't want this guy to access on HTTP or anyone else on HTTP. So we have that feature in app service that we can enforce HTTPS for all requests to your application, ensuring data in transit is encrypted. So data transit encrypted. And this HTTP is a feature of app service, only HTTPS allowed. All right. Now, this when we create app service, we get the uh, public public URL, like uh, Azure App Service.net and whatever the name you given to it. And this is not something you would like to give to your customers. You would like to give the like xyz.com or abc.com. So what you can do, you can customize the domain. Customize the domain. That is the functionality of your app service again. And it can easily bind with SSL binding. Again, this can be done through the app service. Plus, for SSL, you need what? You need certificate. It also provide you the certificate. You can utilize Azure managed certificates. One-stop shop. Shop but stop. For us, this is like this for now. So that can be done. So now, see, the network is secure, authentication identity is secure. Now the traffic which is coming, data in transit is secure, and you have customized domain bind with the SSL, and you have the managed certificate all through the Azure. Okay, you can also bring your own certificate. It's not like it's a mandate, but why making it complex? You know, engaging so many people and managing things, just use the Azure one. All right, so this is all good as of now. One more thing, as I told you at the beginning, this is not how the things designed. you don't expose your app service directly. There is always something at the front. Let's suppose we have what a different application gateway. This is a resource of Azure, but just to show you, that's the reason I'm creating it here. So we have application gateway. Let's call it a app gateway. App gateway in front. Okay, app gateway. This is app gateway. Right, let me put it here, app gateway. So traffic will come to the app gateway. App gateway public IP uh, you will add in your DNS so that somebody will access xyz.com and get this public IP, and your URL will go here to the app gateway. So why are we using app gateway? Because of the wonderful feature that it provides, WAF, web application firewall. This will secure you from WASP top 10 and so many other web related HTTPS or layer 7 related threats like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and more. Just to add here information, we will go through the DDoS protection, and I think we have already made one video. This WAF is important if you want to secure your DDoS on layer 7 as well, because the DDoS provided by Azure IP protection, network protection is for layer 3 and layer 4. If you want to protect layer 7 from DDoS, you must have WAF. It provides you WAF, also security from DDoS. Now, managed identity. This is all good as of now. Now, managed identity is something that we should always use when your app service is talking to one of the Azure services, because this service needs to authenticate or identify itself or has the access. So utilize managed identities for Azure resources for an app to securely access other Azure service without storing credentials in code. For example, we have database here, right? We have database here. Let's call it a database. This is a database. Now there is a connection string which has the information to talk to this, but we don't want anything stored in the application, any kind of credential that it can talk to this. So we can utilize managed identity here and give managed identity access to talk to DB, right? So this service knows that this managed entity has the access so that it can insert the data or edit the data. Let's put it this way. All right, so this is all good from the app service perspective, just for the completion of the design. Otherwise, people will say, all right, fine, this is all secure. What about the other aspect? So just for this, though we will cover how to secure your database, Azure SQL completely and different aspects of it. But for now, just to complete this video, I'm adding few things on the data protection. Do not worry, we will cover the data protection in upcoming videos. So here it's a database. Again, if you're using Azure SQL, it will become the PaaS services. Just like this, we will make it outside the virtual network, but we can utilize private endpoint for this. And of course, access restriction is also available there. All right. So the very first thing is we can also use TDE, which is transparent data encryption, and advanced threat protection for secure database connectivity. Advanced threat protection in database that we can utilize on database, and application settings that talks to a database. We can store application secrets, connection strings, and other sensitive information securely. Where if you guys are thinking Azure Key Vault, then you are correct. You utilize Azure Key Vault for such information so that it would not be exposed and there would not be any vulnerability. Key Vault will hold all the secret, and whosoever has the access to the Key Vault can get this secret. Nobody else can has the access to the secret. Then finally, monitoring and auditing. These two things that we need to consider. So Azure Monitor and Application Insight is a wonderful tool here. Azure Monitor and Insights, App Insights. App Insight is a great tool to actually get the deep dive insights. So implement comprehensive monitoring for performance, diagnostics, and logging. Use App Insights to monitor application performance, exceptions, and usage in real time. We will cover the entire monitoring on the security perspective in upcoming videos. But just to complete the design, I have to add few things because I don't want people to give some poor feedback like you forget this, you forget that. But the main purpose was the securing app service. Okay. But now we created some kind of design, so started talking about the other stuff as well. Another thing, you can utilize the MS Defender to check the posture, security recommendation for your app service and relevant Azure services, which is connected with the app services. Okay. Nothing else, but do not forget about something very important, which is called BCDR, backup and DR strategy. This will give you the resiliency. If something happens, you have the backup. And if possible, go with the geo redundant deployment and plan your DR as well. Then finally, if we talk about application, this is all from the Azure perspective. But from the application, content security policy headers to mitigate cross-site scripting and data injection attacks by specifying which dynamic resources are allowed to load. You can do these things, and you can have so many things inside the code. Okay. And finally, you should regularly update your application frameworks, dependencies, and Azure services to the latest version to patch known vulnerabilities. It's not the VM patching, it is the different patching I'm talking about, the Azure services latest version and your application related things. Anyways, the extra information I gave you, even if you are not interested, it's fine, because each one of the aspect will be covered in the detail, and this video was specifically for the Azure App Services, how to secure Azure App Services, and we talked a lot, and I think it was informative and helpful. Well, thank you for watching, and you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.